This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to the next in the series I'm calling What Happened To. Today we're taking a look at 2016. This is a series where I go back and look at the most anticipated lists of games as voted on and compiled by Rick Vineyard and everybody over at Board Game Geek. So we go back and look. I'll have links to the playlist and the other videos if you've not seen the others below. So we're going to go through the top 20. I'm going to skip some of these that are repeats from previous years because they didn't come out. I will say this week might be the weakest week. I just want to set you up for that. There's a couple of games. Usually I have played all the games on the list except maybe one or two. This one there's a couple more than that. Not a lot, but I will say I don't know anything about this game. I kind of move on, and just kind of speculate for 30 seconds about it and what I remember about it and what I've seen about it, and that's it. But this is a very interesting year here, so let's just jump right into it. Number 20 is Imperial Assault 2016 expansions, as it's mentioned here. We talked about Imperial Assault last week with the 2015 list. Again, you didn't really see Imperial Assault show up because it kind of was a big splash when it came out, but you can see the strength of it in future years. Because you start to see people really anticipate the expansions. And so I think it speaks to the quality of the game. Now I think I said last week that the game is no longer in print. They are still actually manufacturing copies, but they're not putting out anything new for it. So it is still around, and people are still picking it up and playing it. I was under the impression for some reason they had stopped making it, but I mean, they stopped making new stuff for it a couple of years ago, and they're still printing it. So that right there lets you know. I mean, it's Star Wars, so, people like Star Wars, but that lets you know the longevity of the game. They're like, we're not making anything new for it, but we're still going to print it, still going to put it out. We don't need to keep revitalizing it with new stuff. We're done making stuff for it, and it's good to go. So I think that's actually a really healthy, positive sign for the game. So that's number 20. See, number 19 we'll skip. It was on a previous year. Number 18 is Mare Nostrum Empires, and this is one I have not played. I would like to play this one. It's kind of a civilization game, and I believe this is kind of like a reprint, new edition of Mare Nostrum, which must have come out probably 10 years before this. Again, I haven't played it. I do see people talk about it. I do know a couple people that have played it, and they really enjoy it. It's a little bit long, but not crazy long for a civilization game. I think it's still in print, like I said, I'm not really sure about this one. And, but I did get some good buzz, and it's just, I think it fits that kind of Civ vibe, and people really like Civ games. So anyway, sorry, I can't talk too much about that. Next one is number 17, Draconis Invasion. I have no idea what this game is. I think I've seen it. I don't know what this game is. I've not heard anybody speak about this one ever. The name vaguely rings a bell, so I don't really know. If somebody knows in the comments, maybe take a look. Somebody might comment on it, and I apologize. It's just I don't know what that game is. And so I'm not going to go investigate and look and do that kind of stuff, because if I don't know, then it hasn't really lasted, at least for me, and it could just be I missed it. So that's okay. So anyway, I apologize for that one. Now, number 16 is interesting, and this is Nemo's War 2nd Edition. Now, the first edition came out from Victor Point Games. It was almost like a print and play game. It's just like on a piece of paper with, little crappy cardboard and stuff. And then it got picked up by Game Salute, or whatever they're called now, and they did a really fancy production. They got Ian O'Toole to do the artwork. This was kind of like his big break in the board game graphical design art part of the hobby, and now he does every Battle Lacerda game and a bunch of other games. I mean, he did Dead Reckoning, which I really love, and I love the art in that as well. So Ian O'Toole, I know he was a huge fan of the original Nemo's War, and then I know he was excited. He spoke even briefly to me about it on Twitter or something, and he was super excited, and then he got into Nemo's War 2nd Edition, and this game's still going strong, because I think it was just a couple of months ago I did a review of I think it's called the Ultimate Edition, kind of like the 3rd edition, it's basically the same as 2nd edition with some of the expansions they had come out with after the 2nd edition, and it's really you can play it multiplayer, but it's really a solo game. It's this big epic solo game kind of set with the character Nemo, with the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea novel, and that kind of sort of Nemo-verse type stuff. If you go look up some reviews of it, it's really, really cool. But this one is just perpetually lasted, and it's near the top of a lot of people's like top 10 solo games of all time. So it's just been really a big hit overall. Now number 15 is Arcadia Quest Inferno. Now, I've not played Inferno, but I have played Arcadia Quest. And that was a really fun game. And that's one that I sometimes think about, like, I should go and play that again. Because I only played it the one time. It was a lot of fun. It's like you're playing sort of a squad-based shooter, because you have like a little team and it's a player versus player thing, and you're moving your little miniatures out and getting objectives and fighting other ones and moving back. It's like a very skirmishy kind of thing, but very board gamey and streamlined and cool little like chibi-fied miniatures types of things. But it's cool. It's a really cool game. And I don't really see too much about this one recently. I know they came out with Star Arcadia Quest, which is sort of like the sci-fi version of the fantasy Arcadia Quest. But I do know a lot of people really have enjoyed this game, and you can see obviously the strength of the previous year's release with the expansion hitting the anticipated list again. So yeah, so I think this game is still kicking around, but Cool Mini are not kind of like, some of their games are perpetual. I would say Blood Rage and Zombicide, you know, stuff like that is perpetual and always in print. But there's some stuff that comes and goes with them. And, you know, so Arcadia Quest is kind of one of those that probably didn't do quite as well as some of the others. Now, speaking of Cool Mini or not, or Come On, or whatever, number 14 is The Others, Seven Sins. So this is another, this is a neat one. I like this one a lot. I think I've only played it twice though, maybe 3 times. But it's a co-op sort of fighting game where it's sort of set in like the 1990s, and it has all of these like demons that come and like invade the town, and it's kind of like a Zombicide, right? So there's like a demon invasion, there's a big bad, and then you are running around trying to get weapons and equipment and level up and stuff like that and fight it, and then win the scenario. And so it's kind of a cross between like Zombicide, but also like a boss battler. So like a Kingdom Death, or what's the other one? Death May Cry, something like Death May Die, and then some other stuff like that. So it's kind of like that boss battling, but also co-op type of thing. This is a really fun game, and you really don't see too many people talk about this one. I've not really seen anything kind of come out. This is one of those that was like a big old Kickstarter, kind of like Arcadia Quest, with like every expansion in the Kickstarter already that you could do a stretch goal for, and do the add-on for, and all that stuff. It was all at once, and then poof, kind of gone. I have seen this one in shops though, but I don't know if that's just old copies that have been around a couple of years too. So interesting. We've talked more about Kickstarter over the last couple of weeks and how it's kind of, sort of changing how people view anticipated lists and how things kind of come and go. So this is an example of that, I think. So that's The Others. Number 13 is Evolution Climate. Evolution is an interesting game as well. It's kind of like Nemo's War. I can't remember the name of the publisher, but it was initially a Russian designer who came out with this game, and then they had come out with a few games. I reviewed a couple of their games that were very interesting several years ago. Evolution was definitely the strongest game to come out of that. And then it got picked up and brought over here, and a little bit of tweaks and sort of refinements on the design, because there was some dice rolling for food and stuff like that in the original. But it's a card game where you're sort of evolving your creatures with cards, and it's like multi-use cards, and you have all these different like traits and things that'll interact with kind of the food supply on the board and the other players and their creatures and all that stuff. And so it has had some refinements, and it's had a ton of expansions and sort of one-off side shoots, because there was like the oceans one and some other different kind of variations on the whole evolution thing. So this one's still around, still kicking. And it's really good to see, because it's a really fun game. It's very interesting to play in sort of like I wouldn't say it's educational, but it has like the education vibes. I feel like I'm learning something, but I'm not really learning anything. And But it's cool, it's neat to kind of put little parts and develop your creatures and give them different traits and interact with the whole space. The way that all works is just really, really cool. So that's Evolution Climate, number 13. Still around, still kicking, still like, there's like an evolution universe, right? Where they have these like universe of games. Let's see, number 12 is Star Trek Frontiers. I've not played this. Now this is basically Mage Knight with a Star Trek skin. Although, from what I understand, there are some relatively significant differences. So you're, flying your little ship around the board. It's a big old heavy beast of a card-driven game. It was not designed by Vlaada Chvátil. It was designed by another fella who's done a few games, and I can't remember his name. But, again, I've not played this. I've not really seen anything about this. I think it got an expansion. I don't remember. But again, Mage Knight is definitely still around. So this probably speaks a little bit more to Mage Knight, honestly, than the Star Trek part of it, I think. I think Star Trek carries some weight in the board game world, but not a ton. Like, if it's got Star Trek, I don't think it automatically is up here. It gets a little bump, right? But yeah, so yeah, I don't really know too much about how much this has lasted. I don't really see it being talked about. It's kind of just gone away. I don't know if it was like overly complex, probably for a lot of people that were Star Trek fans that probably picked it up were like, what? What happened in my brain? So anyway, that's Star Trek Frontiers. Number 11, this is one I've heard of. I don't think I hear people talk about it. It's called Gloom of Kilforth, a fantasy quest game. I vaguely remember like this one had some problems or something and didn't. It's a Kickstarter. This is one of those big Kickstarter ones. I don't know. Some of these are, I hate to call them fly-by-night because they probably put a ton of work into it, but some of these companies, they come out, like Kingdom Death is the exception, right? They come out, it's like, yeah, we're gonna make Kingdom Death. It's this huge Kickstarter. It's like $1,000 and tons of miniatures and this crazy epic, weird fantasy variant, and then it lasted. Like it's been around. It's still around and kicking strong. And there's a couple other ones that are like, yeah, that didn't really last. I think this is one of them, but again, I apologize, not really picking up on this one. Now, number 10 is Tiny Epic Western. We talked about in last week's, for the 2015 video, we had Tiny Epic Galaxies, Tiny Epic Defenders, Tiny Epic Western. This is one I've played. I do enjoy this one. It's pretty fun. It's got a cool like poker mechanic. I've seen that poker mechanic in a game somewhere, and I cannot remember what it is, but that poker mechanic that's in Tiny Epic Western, it's in some other game, and I can't remember what it is. But it's cool. This is probably my second favorite. I really like Tiny Epic Galaxies. Tiny Epic Western, though, was a good thing. And like I mentioned last week, there's been a ton of Tiny Epic games, Tiny Epic Dungeon Crawl, that's not the name of it, Tiny Epic Zombies, Tiny Epic Mechs, all these things. So it's just this, they just keep pumping that Tiny Epic thing. So that's number 10. Number 9, I think this is the last one, Ceti Planetary Crisis. I don't remember this one. I do not remember this one at all. And I apologize. I'm not even going to spend any more time. I don't know. Somebody comment on what this game's about. I have no idea. Ceti Planetary Crisis. And I apologize, But I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go back and look and try to pretend like I knew what this was when I looked at the list and research it and tell you about it. Because part of the list is me going, oh, is this game still relevant? I don't know. No. But that's only my personal perspective. All right. So number 8 is Time Stories, A Prophecy of Dragons. Now, I've not played this specific expansion, but this is the first time we've seen a Time Stories expansion show up. And so Time Stories kind of come out of nowhere, and then they had probably like 7 or 8 modules that were planned for it to be released over the years. This is one of those games where you play it, and then if you don't solve like the puzzle of it, it's a co-op game, you kind of time loop or quantum leap back to the beginning. You have to kind of play through the same thing again, and then until you find the solution to the puzzle or you fail. I don't care for Time Stories. It's just there's a couple of things. I think some of the new quests and expansions have improved on it, but there was a couple of like just egregiously horrible things that it did in the first couple that I played. That it's like, you can't ship that. I mean, just my opinion, there was stuff where like you'd roll the dice to figure out if you actually won the thing. Like, and there was some other stuff like that. I was like, no, I'm not doing this again, because dice rolling's fine. I like dice rolling, but like if I solve something and you say, oh, roll a dice to see if you actually solved it, get it out of here. I'm done. I don't have time for it. I have better things to do. All right, so that's number 8. Time Stories expansion. And this one, though, to be fair, this one still has kicked around for a while. It has lasted a few years. I haven't heard about it too much lately because I think it's kind of been maybe replaced by Unlock and the escape room stuff. Now that stuff I love. Maybe we'll see some of those show up here in future lists. But I think we've seen that. I like the spirit of it and the idea, and that's why I tried it and tried a couple of expansions. But I think we've seen better implementations of that. Some of the escape room board games, really cool way of doing it. Let's see here. Number 7 was a repeat. Number 6 is a repeat. Number 5 is, I don't think it's a repeat, Star Wars Rebellion. This is a great game. I still have it in my collection. This is basically playing through the original trilogy of movies. And one side is Empire, one side is Rebels. You can play it 2 or 4 players. You can play it 3-player too, but it's 2 teams. And, Rebels versus Empire. This game is great. I love this game. It's probably my top 20. It's kind of like that War of the Ring vibe where, you have the Sauron folks and the free folk and, fighting. And then there's like these, you've got the sort of the war game aspects with moving troops in the case of Rebellion ships. And then you've got the little story elements and character elements and stuff all woven in there. It's a great experience. They did have an expansion for it. They haven't had anything else for it. I don't think the game really needs it. They kind of added some of those like Rogue One types of things in there. If you're watching the new Andor show, which I haven't watched yet, don't spoil anything in the comments or I will ban you from my channel. Yes, I'm not joking. Maybe I should watch Andor before I post this. Or before I look at the comments. So it's got some of that sort of mid-era between like the original movies and some of the new movies. Really cool though. Really cool game. This one I know is still in print, but there's not really anything else to make for it. Like it's done. You don't need to make anything else for this game. I would pick it up though, because I think this one will go away. Because the Star Wars license can be a fickle thing, and this one could go away. Even though I think it's a fantastic, amazing game, this one could disappear, and I would pick it up if you have any interest in it at all. It's a great game. I highly recommend it. That's number 5. Number 4 is a repeat. No more repeats. Number 3 is Gloomhaven. I don't think this has been on the list. This one, it's the number 1 game on Board Game Geek, and it spawned a follow-up, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, and then another follow-up, Frosthaven, which is not out yet, but it's coming. I mean, what does there to say about Gloomhaven? It's the number 1 game. It's great. It's a card-driven dungeon crawl, epic quest type experience that everybody's talked to death. And I really don't need to spend any more time on it. It's number 3, Gloomhaven. The Frosthaven did like, 20 million in Kickstarter? Yeah. So that's number 3. But it wasn't most anticipated. It was not most anticipated. No, only number 3. Number 2 is Seventh Continent. I think this one probably took a year or two before it actually came out. This is one I've not played. Some friends of mine have played it. This is not my style of game. These story card games like this, Etherfields, the Tainted Grail, the new one, I think it's on Kickstarter, GameFound right now. I just did a video for it last week. The new one does take some steps to fix some of my ideas there. So Seventh Continent, probably, from what I've talked to with my friends, it kind of has some of the things that Etherfields and the original Tainted Grail had that I was like, I'm not going to play that. So it's kind of one of the big linear narrative story arc kind of things. It's nothing like my opinion of the game is not necessarily bad on any of these things. It's just like for some reason they just don't. I can't get hook into it, and I just don't know what it is. So I don't even usually try to play these games because I'm I just know I'm not going to like it. There's personally story elements that can be derived out of games not in this way that I really appreciate just a lot more personally. But Seventh Continent, getting back to kind of the objectivity of it, it's been around. They've had some more printings of it. There's been not a new edition, but a new version of the game and kind of the same mechanics and stuff come out. I mean, it's just been around. It's been a big splash. Lots of people really like this game. So I think there's a lot of people really interested in having cards tell them a story. Sorry, I just don't understand the game. That's my problem. Absolutely, my problem with this kind of game. So that's number 2. Number 1 is Scythe, which is another. It's like Gloomhaven. I don't know where it is in the top. I think it's still in the top 10 of Board Game Geek. Several expansions. We've had big box editions of it and all these things and reprintings, and it's been a huge hit. I would probably say it's arguably the biggest game to come out of Stonemaier Games, and they've had a few big ones. They've had Viticulture and Tuscany, and that whole kind of line of games has done really well for them. Tapestry's continued to see expansions and reprints and stuff like that. There's a couple others, that they've done really well, but I think Scythe is probably the one that is probably the main mast sail that is carrying that company forward, at least in terms of financials and keeping them afloat and all that stuff. Maybe Viticulture's right there with it, but Scythe is cool because it's like a big kind of almost like a 4X, although the exploration side of it is not quite there, but it's still there because you still are exploring things in the hexes. You aren't revealing hidden hexes. But it's set in this alternate universe, sort of an alternate World War I ending with a steampunk thing with some little kind of sci-fi stuff in there. Nice little story tidbits. Nice kind of, it almost wants to lean into a Ameritrash dudes in the map type of thing, but it keeps itself very much on the Euro side of the fence with some very deterministic stuff in terms of the area control and kind of the battling. And the way that you kind of do your upgrades is more like that in that Eclipse vibe where you're kind of unlocking things on your player board and all that stuff. A really fun game. I've not played any really of the expansions. I think I played one of them. I know I have, but I just don't remember which one it was. But yeah, so this is a game that's done really well, and it continues to do well for Stonemaier. So anyway, that is the 2016 list. So we got 17, 18, 19, 3 of those, and then I'll probably do some kind of follow-up video. So we got 3 or 4 more to go, and appreciate everybody watching. Thanks.